Hello, everybody, and welcome back to We Are in the Golden Age. I'm your host, Peter Ross of the Milk family, and we are here with Delanoa Star Livingstone, the wordsmith of the Revelatorium Revelations. Always good to have you with us. Tonight's episode is a riveting lecture and discussion on 22 cosmic events currently affecting human consciousness and/or the Earth. Delstar, would you please begin this evening's lecture discussion on this topic?
Yeah, all right. I'm going to thumbnail through. There's actually 22 different frequencies that are involved with Earth at the present time in this incarnation cycle, meaning it's starting like the 50s and continuing, that make Earth a unique place in the entire creation. Nobody else anywhere has frequencies like this or anywhere even comparable. And the reason for most of them is because of the fact that there's a new super universe under creation, and Earth is in the very, very, very center of the bifurcation point of it, which will be another lecture down the road. And also just the natural events of the various cycles that occur within any planetary system. I touched a bit on that last week with the Tree of Life, when I talked about the dispensations and some of these things. And I'm going to, I've prepared a couple of quick notes. I don't like reading notes. I like to but there's so many different of these things that I will forget one or two or not if I don't refer to these little notes. So I'm going to start one after the other. First of all, there's because of the unparalleled circumstances, the energies at the present time and so on, the fact that the Adamic root race, i.e. the Asians, have been trapped in the third dimension for now 3.5 million years. The bottom line of creation, as I mentioned in the previous lecture, is the fifth dimension. But through Luciferian meddling and interference, the Adamics went into the third dimension 3.5 million years ago, and volunteers from all over creation have come in to keep the stability and help the Adamics on the way back up. While at the present time, there's been some more incarnations of extremely powerful, super positive beings to help through this present phase, and that's affecting everybody's consciousness. It's a pyramid, that you have anywhere from 10,000 to 10 million people on your frequency, and as your consciousness goes up, there's a downfeed. And as the ones underneath you, it's like 1, 2, 4, 8, and it feeds downward. So Christ is the capstone at the top. That's the thing you got to keep in mind. This is all Christ's work we're doing here, and the whole thing that's going on is basically a Christ project, as it's not a good way to put it, but that's what it is, sort of. So the very, very high frequency beings have come in, incarnated into the earth plane, and their presence has created a considerable positive effect on the mass consciousness, because it's mass consciousness that's what this is all about. And the name of the game is, this is again going to be another topic, but when you incarnate, your soul atom self, which is a triune celestial being, i.e. your greater, people call it your greater soul, forms a outer projection around itself in the mother's womb, and out you come. Now you're a little baby. As soon as you're born, it triggers your into outer consciousness awareness, which is now your outer ego, and now your soul atom at the age of 4 or 5. This is jumping ahead of the story, but will come into your pituitary gland and then remain, and it'll constantly keep. It's your conscience. It's your, let your conscience be your guide, but it's constantly working you towards your outer ego, towards alignment with it. That's the whole name of the game. If at the time you eventually pass, if your outer consciousness has come into proper alignment with your inner, it's absorbed up as what's called adopted fruit. And that's basically the name of the game. Christ consciousness is where it's at. And once you get a picture of that's the whole thing going on, you got the whole picture of what's going on, because it's Christ consciousness awareness that these consciousness expansions we're undergoing now are headed towards. That's the goal of it, total Christ conscious awareness back to who you are, not like as Jesus said, there's no such thing as death, because your triune celestial self is eternal, and this outer ego little temporary projection we're in is not you. It's just an outer ego casting. The advantage for creation is if your outer ego consciousness comes into alignment with your higher self, and it's sorted up, it brings the lower frequencies up into the higher Christ frequencies, and creation is ever expanding upward that way. Okay, this is just a small part of the whole thing going on that way. But I mentioned in the previous lecture about dispensations, the 12 signs of the zodiac. I mentioned that the same 12 frequencies have a descending, 12 descending frequencies, the same sun signs. We call them signs of the zodiac, and we have the names that came from Atlantis and Babylon. But those same frequencies are on every planet in creation, and there's untold trillions upon trillions upon trillions of planets. But the same 12 frequencies, 12 of them coming in a descending mode, 12 of them in an ascending mode, and those are called the 24 families of creation. And those are the only 24 families of creation. Those are the only families. But they're also represented. This is where the tree of life story came. That you have the 12 chakras. The Eastern people say you only have 7 because they ignore the Gemini, which is in the lungs, and they ignore everything below the Scorpio, which is in the genital area. But the Sagittarius, the thighs, the knees, Capricorn, Aquarius is the ankle, and Pisces is the feet. They ignore those. So you have 12, sun sign induction centers. You also have 144, like 12 times 12, 144 of those energy centers up and down the spine, which I didn't mention last week, up and down the spine. Those same 12 frequencies come through every month. But every 2.5 days they switch, and I mentioned the Bible refers to them. In the midst of the garden stands the tree of life, bearing of its fruit 12 times, 12 manner of fruit 12 times a month.
Yeah,
which kind of just puts it right out there, But there's also every 2,000 years we're going through the same. There's only 24 families in all of creation. We're going through 12 on a descending mode, and then 12 on a ascending mode. So we just finished the Piscean age. We're coming into the Aquarian age. We're now in the Aquarian age, and it will run for 2,000 years. The first 1,000 years are the descending frequencies. The last 1,000 years are the ascending frequencies. When Aquarius is done, we're going to be facing Capricorn, which is because the sun signs of the year go clockwise, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, but the dispensations go counterclockwise, meaning, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, etc. So the fact is that we're in a peak right now, which is why the energies are high, because every time you go from one dispensation to the next, there's a peak. It'll wane about 100 years from now, and then it'll be back to normal. Well, whatever normal is, but it'll be back to, kind of, somebody told me I shouldn't wave my hands around, but I talk with my hands. I guess you're going to have to live with that.
It's perfectly fine.
Yeah. So anyway, the frequencies are incoming, which means they're ascending, they're coming in. I probably had said that in reverse. They're incoming, they're ascending for the next 1,000 years, and then they'll be descending. No, I did have it right. They're descending for the next 1,000 years. They're going to be ascending, which means they're being put back out. The consciousness will put it back out as works and so on. We did that in Pisces for the first 1,000 years up until the peak. And there's always a peak at the halfway point too, in the switch from descending mode to ascending. 2,000 years ago was the height of the Byzantine Empire. There was a peak there. And for the first 1,000 years up, not much going on because it was incoming, as descending. And now the last 1,000 years, it got wilder and wilder to here we are now, because we're now in the discharge. It comes out as works, sort of thing. Now this will go on with every one of the dispensations. So you have 12 dispensations of 2,000 years each. So you have roughly a 25,000 year cycle. That's another reason why there's a huge, big induction of energy going on right now, because we're at the transition between the last 25,000 years and the current. That's what 2012, December 21st was all about. Nobody saw anything happen on the other side. It was all a big woo-hoo, nothing went on, which was wrong, because interdimensionally, it was huge. It was almost literally like Times Square, 1 minute before 12, you're in that year, the 1 minute after 12, you're in the next year. It's a very fast break. Well, the dispensations, the shift from like Pisces started in, out of Pisces into Aquarius started in August of 1988, but was completed until May of 2014. So that's almost a 25-year transition. But the 25,000 year cycles you would expect would be a lot longer are instant. And December 21st of 2012 was Times Square. It was like 1 minute before 12 and 1 minute after 12. I lived in Ottawa at the time, and at 10 p.m. on the 21st, which would have put it on the 20th, which would have put it 2 hours before midnight, a huge interdimensional cheer went up. The hats went in the air and the firecrackers went off, so to speak, because that 25,000 year cycle ended. That's what December 21st was all about in 2012. It was a big deal. As I say, the outer people, I didn't see anything happen. Trees didn't fall over, nothing went on. So, but it was a huge event. So there was another big peak of energy going on, and we're now going into a new 25,000 year. Now, the next cycle that we're talking about is the fact of a 250,000 year cycle. It always seems to be in a multiplication 10 year, but just to finish too, by the way, at the beginning of the last 25,000 year cycle was the Garden of Eden, which defaulted. Even Eve made a blunder. I'm going to be talking about that one of these other nights. Anyway, she blundered, and the Garden of Eden was defaulted. So 25,000 years are pegged, and we've just finished one of the pegs. But now we go backwards for 250,000 years. 250,000 years ago was Lemuria. People talk about Lemuria, right? And what happened there is the reigning planetary prince Caligastia had decided upon his own to advance a third of the Adamics out of the third dimension back up into the fifth before their time, without authorization, and against the request not to. So instantly a line was in the upper, in heaven, let's call it the fifth dimension up is heaven. That's where the good guys are. All right. That's where we're from, by the way, in case anybody hasn't figured that out yet. We're going back up to there at the end of Aquarius. But up there, there's no gray zones. It's black or white, is you is or is you isn't, like the song says, is you is or is you isn't. I can't remember. Anyway, a line was drawn on the sand. Those that were 100% unequivocally for Christ went to Orion. Those that weren't stayed behind, went through the glaciations and all that. And also, every 250,000 years, the polarity of the planet reverses poles. Well, because of that, it didn't this last time. So right now, Earth it's just starting. This is another one of the events going on, right? Earth is starting to make its polarity change, its pole change. And it's not going to be overnight, and it's not going to be like long term. It's going to be fairly quick, but it's not going to be like radical, like the oceans swoop up over the mountains, that kind of stuff. I mentioned this last week. Birds and bees and stuff will have a problem with it, but mankind, for the most part, won't notice. Whether it'll get it's already started. Whether it'll get a little bit rough. We're already going through that. Because the air circulations are starting to be affected. So now 250,000, and we're right at that. We're at the end of the last 250,000 year period. Right now is the transition to the beginning of the next 250,000 years from now. Earth will be transported telepathically by the root race that's evolved ready to do it, which is part of the changes being brought in now, so they will be, and there's a root race, a red Beverly Crusher from Star Trek. You remember one of the red hair, blue eyes with high cheekbone, the cheekbones are way up.
Yeah.
That's one of the root races. That's one of the people from the root race that are waiting on standby. And in fact, you might think of other people that have that characteristic. Red hair, blue eyes, very high cheekbones. And they're waiting on standby. If the Adamics aren't ready in time, they're going to be brought in to do it instead. Earth will be teleported to the womb of Orion and become a protostar. I mentioned, child becomes parent. Well,
yes.
Stars have a planet of a maximum of 12 planets. The solar system has 12 planets, I mentioned them last week. And Earth, planets become stars just like childs become parent. And so Earth is going to be a protostar. It'll evolve, become a star, have its family of 12 planets. Then it'll evolve again because stars go into supernovas or they wade out into white dwarfs and things like Earth's going to become a quasar.
Yeah.
That's its role down the road for the new creation that I've mentioned I will be talking about, but that's Earth. Earth is in the picture right there because it's part of the new creation, central part of the new creation. 250,000 years before Lemuria, which was 500,000 years ago, again at 250, that was Mu. People talk about Mu. They confuse Mu and Lemuria because there's really no way to differentiate between the two. But there was actually 250,000 years between the two. So there was another spike in Mu. The Earth's polarity had, magnetic field had reversed. And then 250,000 years before that, and these spikes that I'm talking about, like Mu and Lemuria, there was also they were with an endeavor to try and get the Adamics back up into the fifth dimension. A lot of work to try and get the Adamics back up into the fifth dimension. Well, for some reason or not, Mu didn't make it. Of course, 250,000 years ago, it defaulted by Caligastus stupidity.
Yeah.
250,000 years before Mu was called the Demetia Center. It was a very big enterprise. This is 750,000 years ago. And it was specifically set up as the first attempt after 3.5, well, it would be pretty close to 300 million years, 3 million years, to get the Adamics back up into the fifth. It was the first major effort to do that. But again, the Luciferians were meddling around. And instead of doing something about it, Caligastus said, took a, ho-hum attitude about it. And that brought, again, black or white. You can't have lukewarm, be hot or be ye cold, but because ye are lukewarm, I spee thee out of my mouth. It says it right there. You can't be lukewarm. You're going to be one way or the other. And that, for all the people that are watching this, those that dabble in spirituality and think, well, I know all these neat things and I can show off to my friends and so on. That's lukewarm. Be very, very careful about that. Be thee hot or be thee cold. But because ye are lukewarm, I spee thee out of my mouth.
Yeah.
So 750,000 years. So these are these, and of course there was continuing cycles before that, but there wasn't any effort to bring consciousness back up out of the third dimension. So they're not of a record of any kind. Not on record. So now we go up again to a. And right now, so we're at we're at a peak between now and 25,000 years. We're at a peak between now and 250,000 years. And these are all energies that were coming in, and the spikes are high. By the way, when I say these energies come, the people will say, "Oh, there was a really big induction, last week, everybody," and then 6 months from now, the scientists will say, "Yes, we observed a very large explosion in a black hole 450 million years from now." Well, boom. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. These inductions and these energies are all programmed to come at a certain time. Some of them from 8-9 billion years ago. Stuff that's going on Earth right now has been underway for a long, long time. Because there's a new super universe under creation, and that didn't come up out of somebody's idea overnight. I know what, we'll start a new creation,
Yeah.
It's been in the works for a while, I guess. So now we're talking about a galactic cycle, which is the progression of the whole, solar system around the galaxy. This is 250 million years. Now, 250 million years ago, the root race program was started. Planets don't spawn life out of the ocean and everybody springs up and say, gee, I'm smart enough, I can calculate math. And then the next guy says, I'm even smarter, I can build a spaceship to go to, Sirius, that kind of stuff. That doesn't happen. Planets do not evolve evolutions on their surface ever under any circumstances. They're placed there to undergo experiences of learning through those frequencies of that particular planet, which was set up for the frequency it's to, be able to impart to the root races that are being put on it. Sort of idea. Well, Earth started the root race program 250 million years ago, and we've now finished the 12 root races. There are 12 root races, the same as there are 12 signs, because they're tied to the same 12 frequencies. And the current root race, i.e. the Adamics, was the last of the root races to finish the program for Earth. And the ones that are stuck in the third dimension, and we're here to help them, we volunteered to come into the third dimension to do it. They're the last contingent of the last root, because there's the whole root race contingent is in the sun. They come to Earth in contingents of 10,000. And there was many, 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 many Adamic contingents until this last one, and they got bogged down. This 10 billion Adamic contingent, and when they're not incarnated, they're in the fourth dimension.
Yeah.
They don't go back to the sun and then come back. They're in the fourth dimension until they get out of the third and fourth dimension back to the fifth. And some of them, once they do, will be supposedly the group that will teleport to Orion, Earth to Orion. The other part will join the seed atoms. The atoms that the root races that have been through Earth so far have all been training for a special purpose, which is to seed the new creation. This new super universe I'm talking about. Well, they're the seed atoms to begin populations there, and the rest of the Adamics will join that. There's 100 trillion soul atoms sitting in Orion, ready to move off to the new creation once the flow starts taking place, which is fairly imminent. I'm not saying today or tomorrow, but it's not 1,000 years from now or anything like that. It's fairly soon. But there's 100 trillion soul atoms sitting and waiting, ready to go. And this last group of Adamics will be part of that migration too. So that takes care of the dispensations and stuff like that. Now you have the Polaris star is a star that I can't remember what the term is, but it wanes in frequency, then increases, then wanes, then increases, and so on. And since 250,000 years ago, its polarity, the Polaris star drops a pretty strong frequency into man's consciousness, and it's been in reverse. So that's been a source of a lot of the negative stuff that's been going on, but it's now coming back into realignment right at this point as we talk. There's also, I don't know if you remember or not, but in 2003, I think it was around August or something like that, Mars made its closest approach to Earth. The closest approach for the last, I think it was 67,000 years, something like that. It won't be that close again for 57,000 years. I mean, this is a very, very rare event. Well, the energies, Mars's soul atom consciousness, on the split second that it made that, it's coming closer and closer and closer. Then there's one split hair. It's not even a second. It's just a split hair when it's the exact closest. And now all of a sudden it's going farther and farther away. Well, at that exact instant when it was closest, the soul atom of Mars made a fourth dimensional visual contact with people on the planet, those that were able to see it. it was in the form of a 10-foot diameter happy face, bright orange, not a yellow happy, but a bright orange happy face. Oh, how are you doing? Nice to see you. I'll see you again when you're back again. But that was a huge boost into the consciousness, very, very high positive frequencies, to have that happen. I'm going to take a quick break here to see where I'm going with my notes because I've lost. So I started his own file. Photostar, I've just done that. The beings from all over creation. There's another. Now this is not necessarily a positive thing. It would add on to the side of things that would be bringing the conscious down a bit, but it was covered off by these new people that have been coming in with much higher consciousness on. The Revelation says that Michael and his angels went to war in the heavens, and the dragon was cast into the earth. Well, I might as well go ahead with this one right now. We're the Luciferian rebellion, which I will do a whole show on, a whole talk on, was 5 billion years ago, and it ran on its own course. In reality, things like the Draconians, the Draco solar sector and so on, it went into a regression 50 billion years ago. Now, regression isn't a rebellion. There's a huge difference. Regression means that they just got a little bit, nuts. Rebellion means like the guys in the States tearing the cities apart. They're actually rebelling against, anyway, and it's been running its course. It hasn't finished cleaning itself up yet. There's still a bit of it to be done, but the Luciferian rebellion was let run its own course until 2,000 years ago, and then Christ officially put an end to it on the Mount. When the Bible says, he said, "Satan, get thee behind me." Well, that's a netic that went out to the entire 1,000 galaxies, and all of the Luciferian activity within it said, "That's it, you're done, goodbye." It was ended. It was stopped because it was decided that there was. See, these things are left to run their own course because some good things might come out of it, or secondly, it can be shown down the road. There's no point in doing that because it never goes anywhere. It doesn't end any. It doesn't. It just peters out to nothing. See, so in this case, it was stopped because it had reached a point where it could be seen that it had reached this point of torpidity, or whatever you want to call it. Nothing positive could ever more come out of it, or it was ended. It was done. So it was ended 2,000 years ago. We're now at this point. This is a huge part of the energies that we're experiencing right now.
Yeah.
We're right now in the cleanup, in the aftermath of the Luciferian rebellion of the 2,000 years later, called Armageddon. Everybody thinks, the Israel and the good guys and the bad guys are going to put swords out and start doing one of these, History Channel effects, swords in the air and spears and everybody's yelling and gray shadows are running back and forth. And then the commentator says yes. And then in the next battle, and the swords go in the air and arrows go in the air and the shadows go back and forth. That's what they think the Battle of Armageddon is. Well, it's not. It's a mammoth cleanup that has taken place through all 1,000 galaxies where the Luciferian effect took place. And when I say it, it's not like 1,000 galaxies were all blown to shit or anything like that. There's in this galaxy alone, there's a couple of 100 billion stars, and every star has a maximum of 12 planets. Some only have a couple already. Others have the whole 12. We have 12 here. I mentioned that last week. But now you have 1,000 galaxies. So that's a lot of planets. Okay, that's an awful lot of planets.
And that's just talking about our local universe.
And that's just this local universe because there are trillions of local universes. See? But there was only 27,000 planets in that whole collection that ever got, embraced any amounts of the Luciferian, philosophies, their ideas. And out of that, there was only 2,500 planets out of all of those that actually had a third dimension based on Luciferian precepts, and we're one of them. Now, I mentioned this last week. We're we're at the bottom 10% of how bad things are, but we're at the top of that 10%. So things could be a lot worse, and of course they could be an awful lot better. All right, but because of all of these energies that I'm talking about run out that are confluencing on Earth right now, affecting, improving the consciousness. So the opportunity has never been better, and it won't even be as good, but it won't be anywhere even close to this for the next 750,000 years on some other planet, for consciousness to say, with the frequencies to work with, I'm going to get rid of my conditions and get back to my triune state. That's what's going on. That's the name of the game that's going on right now. So because of these energies, Christ and his angels went to war in the heavens, and the dragon was cast in the earth. Well, all of the people from those 27,000 planets were swept together, as it were. That's called a conglomerate abomination, and was cast into the earth, i.e., incarnated into Earth's third dimension. And that's what the population, the baby boom was. It was a big, huge spike, and then off it went again, because that was the cast of dragon incarnating into Earth. And that's why you've got the terrorists running around amok, you got the Taliban, you got all of this stuff going on, because some of these people were carrying pretty heavy conditions. And they've incarnated out, and they're bringing those negative conditions forward instead of saying, boy, this is great, I can get rid of all my conditions. They haven't woken up yet. They're going to be incarnating for quite a few times before they even begin to start waking up to the possibility of being able to wake up. The other side of the coin is some of these people came in that only had, just a couple of wrong ideas and so on, and they're okay. So that was the negative side, as I say, because they brought in a pretty big cloud of negative thought contaminations and so on through their Akashic fields, Akashic records and so on. But like I say, that was offset in advance by an incarnation influx of some, like there was, I can't remember how many, but there was, I guess about middle 2007, 2008, I think it was something like 40 million soul atoms from the sun were brought in one big swoop, incarnated. It wouldn't have been that many. It would have been more like maybe 400,000, something like that. But, there's been incarnations in preparation with people with very stable consciousness so that Earth isn't going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And when you bring in all the badasses from around, it's like bringing every criminal in the world into one penitentiary. You're going to need a lot of guards. So, it's that kind of idea is what happened here. So that's another one of the effects going on. There was I can't remember, around 2008 or 2009, and this is quite a big one actually. The creators had set up an effort for the new creation. They'd set up the possibility of a direct link from Versa, which is the capital of this super universe, which is 90 billion light years from here. So usually the communication from the creators goes through, the creator sun daughters out into the Lanadonic suns, out into the, into the people on the planets and so on. Yeah. But in this case, there was a direct link that was made down into the third dimension, straight from Reversa, straight down in, because a frequency like that is needed in the new creation. And it was successful. And it was said that even the creators had their fingers crossed on that one. That was a big step. Well, that was a huge new, effort. And there was also, in the same vein, people, the creators are known by the people in paradise. They can experience the presence of the creators and so on. But otherwise, we would experience, or the people down here on the planetary levels would experience through faith. The fifth dimensionality frequency of, experiencing the creators is faith-based. See, but there was a new input that was created so that people on the third dimension, it all walks, but only right now, it's the people with a higher consciousness that are, even without being aware necessarily, but they have a much closer affinity to use the expression God. Alpha and Omega, the creators, are what man calls God. God is the greater faith of humanity looking towards the creators. It's basically what God is. The devil is is the greater, conglomerate, lesser condition of mankind looking for an excuse.
Like the beast conditions.
Like the what?
Like the beast condition.
Yeah, well, the beast condition is a little bit different. When mankind incarnated into the third dimension, they incarnated into the animal matrices, that were already existing. And so if you're, tied like really basically to those animal matrix side, you haven't started to evolve your consciousness. Well, then you have what's called a bestial condition in your conscious. That's where, people, if you're have purged most of those direct frequencies, there's a whole deal I'm going to be talking about on the number of the beast. And
Yes.
that's what it does. But the beast is because mankind is walking around subject to the instincts and mores of the animal world. Okay, and if your frequency is really low, you're tied a lot more to that than you are to your soul atom, which is trying to get you out of there. So now you can, when you think of, well, I hate to use the word God because it's a lesser idea of what's really going on, but for now, for a lot of people that'll do. When you think of God, your love for the Father and all that kind of stuff, it'll be a much greater made feeling of connection that you have there because of this new direct link from the creators down into, superseding faith. So it's like a greater made faith. It's not just like, I believe, therefore, you say, oh, I can actually feel you. So now I don't have to just have faith alone. I believe for sure. It's like Peter, 2,000 years ago, the disciple Peter. Peter was the first of all. The Catholics say Peter's the rock upon which our whole religion is founded, because Jesus said, Peter's the rock upon which I found my kingdom. So they made Peter the guy, the rock. Well, Peter was the first to say, see, Jesus was the prophesied Messiah, but he wasn't coming on like the Messiah would everybody expected. There wasn't flowering white robes, and he wasn't bless you, and smirky smile, and that's what they expected a Messiah to do. Well, Jesus was a firebrand, pissed everybody off, because he didn't broach lesser conditions and he didn't broach BS at all. He was very dynamic. He wore, I call it, remember Gandhi? Mahatma Gandhi from India wore what's called a narrow suit. It was a NERO suit, buttons down the front. Muslims tend to wear them a bit, and the slacks, with, the crease down the front and so on. Well, he wore those. They were made out of linen. He always wore linen. It was a kind of clothing that doesn't have static in it. But he wore narrow suits. That's what his main, was. Instead of flowering robes, he wore a narrow, almost like a business suit. And they didn't just cruise around, they walked fast. If you can imagine the whole troop walking at, what's the word, when power walking, that's it.
Yeah.
When people power walk, well, they power walked from place to place because in those days, you couldn't telephone the town ahead. They're coming, get ready, boom, you'd appear and then they're gone before word got out that they were there, and the Romans would come running in and they're already gone. Where'd they go? They were always staying ahead of everybody, and they walked fast. So, the whole show that was going on then was not Messiah-like, according to the preconceived beliefs. See? Well, Peter was the first of all to say, you are the Messiah. I get a buzz when buzz up my spine when he was the first of all to say, you are the Messiah. He was the first of all to accept in his heart that this man who said he was the Messiah is in fact the Messiah. He said, upon this rock, I will found my kingdom. Just think about that. That's a profound thing. Upon this rock, the first man in the entire planet to actually accept that he was the Christ. I will, on this fact, on this person's acceptance of my purpose, I can found my kingdom. And now, of course, that's been, upon Peter is now the rock upon which, but it was his acceptance and consciousness that was the big show. Now, let me go back to my notes a bit because I've been rambling right now. I've been mentioning, I've mentioned the radionic ships of the heavenly host, I think, in the first lecture.
Yes.
There's been radionic ships are fifth dimensional spaceships from all over creation. There's a huge, vast fleet outside Pluto. They teleport into Earth's atmosphere and so on. And since now that's a huge effect on man's consciousness, because they're helping that evolution or that expansion take place. Starting in 2016, it was upgraded like many fold.
Yeah.
So now the Bible talks about clouds, up into the clouds, down from the clouds, into the cloud. That there's 20 different references to clouds, in the Bible, and they're talking about, because these ships are when they're in Earth's atmosphere, they're in the fourth dimension. You don't see them per se, but they're called radionic because they have magnetic fields, and the magnetic fields will ionize the water vapor, the clouds and so on, and cause them to form characteristic lines along the magnetic lines of the magnetic field. And those you can see plain as day.
Yes.
Those are the clouds that the Bible is talking about. Well, the radionic ships of the heavenly host is one of the three of the Revelation, Revelatorium Revelations books. It's the third book. But are you sitting down? There's over 500 million of them around Earth every day. There's a lot of
vast numbers.
That's a big number. Now that's recent. And as I say, it's starting about 2016. It moved up from millions up to 500 million. Now those aren't all big, huge ships. The motherships and the fatherships carry a large contingent of the mobile scout ships, and the little mobile scout ships are like the little, like jeeps. I don't know, we call them jeeps. And those are the ones if you go into that website, even on the opening chapter, there's photographs in there where you see, hundreds of them, plain as day. Well, that's just one photograph of one small piece of the sky over one small town in one small area of Canada. What about the whole rest of the planet? There's where you get your 500 million, or more than 500 million of them. So that is also, see, it's a two-way street. The ships in the heavenly host can't see into the third dimension because they don't have the third dimensional senses. So they know what's going on in the third dimension through attunement and consciousness of people that are high enough that they can. Now, you don't necessarily have to know that it's going on, but they attune in consciousness with people whose consciousnesses are high enough to be able to make that attunement. And those people are the eyes and ears. And they can accumulate a picture of what's going on in the third dimension by collectively all those consciousness, like microscopes and, was it telescopes? That's not right.
Or like NSA mass surveillance.
Cameras, like cameras and microphones, it's sort of that idea. But that's the one side going up. But the other side is like a scout ship will come in close, and they'll drop a thought in to whoever it is that they want to, and they don't control your thoughts or make you do something you don't want to do. So, but they'll drop a thought in, go to Tim's and have a coffee, Tim Hortons, or go to, Special Donuts or something like that. And there you'll meet with, they'll be in line and you'll have a chat with somebody. Well, the information will pass from one to the other, and it'll move around a few times. And now the guy's just flown to LA, meets up with somebody down there, and they're with the target. This is going on all the time. Everybody's a taxi, almost literally. But the vast fleet is dropping new, higher frequency thoughts into mankind's consciousness constantly. Most people are oblivious to it, and most people too will get the buzz and then ignore it. Yes. But people that are working with that, it's intuitive. You don't say, "Oh, I just got a buzz, I must go to Tim's." They say, "Geez, I feel like a coffee. I'm going to go to Tim's." It's really neat, and I can tell you a couple of stories of some pretty amazing cue-ups that have happened that way. Well, I'll give you one example. Now, this is back in the 60s, during a lesser phase of my life. When I was younger, I was manager of a hippie rock and roll band out of Vancouver. And we were making a trip from Vancouver to Toronto. And the band was carrying an Atom. I can't remember what planet it was from now, but the music they were playing was quite a bit different than what was current in the end of the hippie music of the 60s. In the 60s, their music was distinctly very, because they were being, telepathically, they were being, I used to sit, during a band practice, and I'd hear the bass lines before the bass player played it, and I said, well, am I conducting the orchestra? No, I wasn't. It was an Atom that was, telepathically putting out how the beat should go and how the lines, bass lines and guitar lines and everything. Beautiful music. I mean, there's if you go to YouTube and you look for Mother Tucker's Yellow Duck, okay, now that was, for its time, very, very good. There was better music than that was done through the Christ family in the early 70s, and they were supposed to be the ones that actually came out with this new music, for humanity. But in order for it to work properly, because it was like a jet, you had to know how the chords went and with the chord changes and so on, but you had to play free of memorized lines, because it was the moment that you were playing frequencies that were coming through that would be translating the conditions in the audience. Well, if you had an ego situation where somebody liked the bass line and would freeze on it, and that's the way they'd play it every time, cut it all off. Well, that's what happened. And eventually, about the mid-70s, that whole program of the Beatles were originally part of it. The lady came in and screwed that up. Buffalo Springfield were in there for a short while. Loving Spoonful came in, and they had a hit that was put together in 2.5 hours in a recording studio in New York. They were sitting there, like they were a folk song type group. But anyway, the piano player started doing da 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 da. Summer in the City. They had that thing recorded in 2.5 hours from scratch to get them going fast. But the lead, of the group wanted to remain a folk group, so the Atom moved from there over to Mother Tucker's, which was put together in Vancouver. Now, in '67, I was told that Mother Tucker's were going to be holding the fort for the next show. Well, while a band in the mountains is preparing to get ready, and they're the ones that are going to carry the show forward eventually, see? So now we're on our way to Toronto. We're going through Creston, where the spine of the Rockies is, the Continental Divide is where the water flows this way. Now it flows that way, and it's all the way down through into Mexico, the Continental Divide. And so Creston is right on the Continental Divide, right at the top of the pass. There's a great big huge parking lot and a gas station and a restaurant and all that stuff full of trucks, So we stopped there to have a coffee and pie and blah blah blah. When we're coming out back to our van, there's 3 guys came over and said, "Yeah, we're the crosstown bus out of Nelson. We heard you playing da-da-da, and we all shook hands and said hi. Yacked a bit about the concert we'd done a couple of months before Nelson, then off we went. Well, that was a humongous connection made, because the Atom jumped from Mother Tucker's to those guys, who became the Amethyst Band, who were the ones in the mountains, Kootenai Mountains, preparing to get ready to carry the whole thing forward as the final show. And they're the ones that the bass player couldn't let go of his memorized lines and so on. So the whole thing was dropped, and punk rock, negative music walked right in behind it. Punk rock music and so on, just like out of nowhere there. And it's still the music of, listen to the hit parade today. It's still that basic fundamental solar plexus hypnotic beat. And the music is basically chants. You listen to the singing, they're actually chanting.
Essentially,
it's primitive. It's primitive music compared to what that stuff was, But the coordination that it took to get from Vancouver 700 or 800 miles into Creston, and from Nelson, which is like 300 or 400 miles up in the Kootenai zone, to be at the same place at exactly the same time, in exactly the same moment on this parking lot, That's a huge amount of coordination of intuition. Oh, let's do this. Let's stop here for coffee. That's what I'm talking about. That kind of idea. That's going on a lot. Underneath, nobody knows about it, but that's going on a lot.
You know what they, you know what they say, like how the Revelatorium says, nothing in creation happens for nothing, and nothing in creation has nothing to do.
Yeah. So nothing. I mean, there are certain circumstances, like just straight out of the X Factor, but that's fun too. But no, an awful lot of coordinating is going on all the time, So, and that was when. See, this is the Earth is the beta test because the energies are here and all the factors according of the 2,500 planets. Earth is the first to actually get the lyso treatment. Get the consciousness back up where they belong and so on. That's another one of the big energies and so on. Mankind over the next 2,000 years is being raised back up in consciousness to the fifth dimension. I mean, I'm talking about all mankind. The volunteers lead the way and the Adamics follow. And at the end of the principle of Capricorn is the gate of life and gate of death. So at the end of Aquarius 2,000 years from now, we're facing Capricorn, the gate of life and gate of death. And like I said last week, I've just told you when the final judgment is, because there you're going to be looked at. Did you clear your consciousness? No, you didn't. You're off to one of the other 2,500, Did you clear your consciousness? Yes, you did. Well, here's the fifth dimension. Come on up. You're welcome. See? And at when, after the beginning of Capricorn, so on the whole entirety of the third dimension life on it, which was precipitated for a reason, as I say, it didn't evolve up out of the ocean. So the whole third dimension is divested. It's forgotten. It's gone. The purpose is finished.
Yeah.
Now mankind fell into that. Huh?
No plants or animals.
No, everything's gone. See, again, this is jumping ahead a wee bit, but 1,000 years ago, the matrices for a third dimensional life on the surface was precipitated because Earth at that point was nothing just except a great big huge ball of lava, hard lava. And that had happened. This is again one of the conversations down the road. I'll detail more. I mentioned it before, but Earth got smacked by a loosened moon 2.5 billion years ago, and it just like fractured the surface. So lava came up, volcanoes and big crack. All of the original crystalline 12-strand DNA, which the granites and the feldspar, all of those quartz elements, they got pushed way, way down, and were covered by a deep layer of just hardened gray black lava. I guess lava. I can't remember. There's another term for it. Anyway, like there's all kinds of these outcrops on around Lake. There's a big outcrop all the way down through the southern part of Washington State. But these are because of the recent earthquakes and volcanoes like Mount Hood in Oregon and so on spews out a fair amount of lava and so on. So the lava that you see around now are new lavas, but the original Earth was nothing but a big ball of hardened lava. So life was put on the surface to over time, because it's just a simple thing. Just, leaves fall in the fall, leaves fall in the fall, leaves fall in the fall. Well, now you talk about 500,000 years, the original leaves are now down there a couple of thousand feet, way, way down there, and they metamorphized into feldspars and, the metamorphic rocks and so on. And now you get quartz and all the other stuff on the surface, and the tectonic plates were to move, because it all takes place in the temperate zone. This band from, the Arctic Circle to the Antarctic Circle, that's a temperate zone. Well, it all takes place in there. So when it's done, it's moved slowly out, like under the Arctic, there's tropic, the drills will bring up tropic vegetation, because it was one of the original places that got done and got moved up out of the way. So that's another part of all of the stuff that's going. That's almost completed now, just about literally almost completed. So 2,000 years from now, that whole program is no longer needed. It's done its job. Thank you very much. And so it'll be gone. But mankind will be in the fifth dimension. Those that are, and this is what the ascension is. People talk about, I'm going to be, I'm going to ascend. Well, you don't decide you're going to ascend. That's people that the Eastern mystics teach a process through your outer consciousness and so on, where you can crystallize your outer ego consciousness enough that it can survive after death as a conscious entity in the fourth. And this is what they consider transcended master and so on. Well, that's all not good. How do I put it? That's what the Luciferians were doing, you know. And so anyway, ascension really means that you're raised back up into the next dimension or frequency. So, all right. So a big one, and this is going to be like a huge topic of conversation. Right now, there are seven. The outer creation is over 900 trillion light years across. You know, the scientists say it's 14.5 billion light years across because their telescopes can only see 14.5 billion years. Oh, well, what do you know? You know, that's how old the universe is. Well, once they get a new, you know, the big ones they have now, they'll develop another whole run of bigger ones that'll see 15.5 billion years. And they will say without any shame whatsoever, the universe is 15.5 billion light years. I've been tracking this since they were at 12.5 billion years, way back in the 60s, you know. Then they got the Hubble in. Well, that put a big jump. Now they got the Sanders and other big telescopes in Chile and Hawaii and so on. And now they're looking at 14.5 billion years. Well, you know, that's how the outer world looks. As far as we can see is how old the universe is, you know, because they can't go any farther. But it's 900 trillion light years across, and it's still in its infancy. You know, it's just getting started. You know, creation is bigger than people think. You know, so the outer creation is composed of 7 great super universes that surround. There's creation is actually the island of paradise is at the top of the 13th dimension. There are 4 more around those, like the rings of Saturn.
Yeah.
Which is called the inner creation. That's the 12th, 11th, 10th, and 9th dimensions. That whole conglomerate is called the inner creation. Then the 8th dimension is actually a void. Now, I'm not talking about gaps in space and so on. It's frequency differences, but the 8th dimension is a void. It's a transition frequency. You know, the outer creation surrounds the inner creation like petals of a flower in 7 great super universes. And the frequencies of the outer creation are totally different than the ones in the inner creation. So the 8th dimension is a transition void. When you're coming from the inner creation to the outer, you know, you pass through the 7th dimension quietly while your frequencies are being transformed from those of the one into those of the other. If you're going back up towards paradise on your way back up, the same thing. You're going through the 8th dimension and your frequencies are being converted from those of the outer to those of the inner. So current creation is 7, outer creation is currently 7 super universes surrounding the inner like petals of a flower. They were all based on the male frequencies of the only begotten Son and the Father, which is why religions today don't talk about the mother and don't talk about the daughter.
Yeah.
But as above, so below. And there isn't anything else on earth except Father, Mother, Son, Daughter. That's it. The creators, the Holy Trinity, is Father, Mother, only begotten Son, Daughter. So the outer creation as it currently exists, the 7 super were all based on the frequencies of the Son and the Father. A new first super universe is being started up based on the frequencies of the daughter. Okay, and
Yeah.
it's going to come off by bifurcation off this local universe, which is why this local universe has such an important bearing. And Orion is where the throughput is, where these, you know, the whole thing's going to flow through into the new creation, which is why Orion is front and center. And Earth is the training sphere where the soul atoms were being trained for seed atoms and so on, which is why Earth is so important. Earth also has the important role because I mentioned it's eventually going to be a quasar. You know, if people don't know what a quasar is, you can look it up on Google and so on. These are, you know, like stars that have the energy of, they say, the energy of 100 billion stars. like huge amounts of energy. What they don't realize, of course, is that it's like a lighthouse beam or a laser beam, and they're looking right up the pipe, and they see all that mammoth energy. If you look straight up a lighthouse and measure how much light energy you're looking at, and then you made that a 360-degree ball, that'd be a pretty bright object. Even though it's not. It's a pretty bright light, but it's not a pretty bright object. Well, quasars are beaming energy from one part of creation to another. So in the new creation, the second new super universe is going to be based on a principle of higher energies, and the quasar that Earth is going to become will be the quasar that pipes energy from this creation into the new creation. And so everybody has a purpose. Everything's going on. You know, for what it's worth, the soul atom that's going to be the atom and so on for the quasar has been walking on Earth for quite a while in preparation, and was originally known as Buddha.
Yeah.
And secondly, founded the Essenes. You know, at a later point. I mean, of course, it was the Essenes that Mary and Joseph were trained in. So when Jesus was incarnated, there was a spiritual background already for him.
Yeah.
You know, because it was the Essenes teaching that he started with. So, all right. So that's the new creation. That's a big subject. And the Earth is the training sphere. Volunteers have come from all over creation. I mentioned last week the photon disk.
Yeah.
Now that's a huge source of higher energy. Scientists say that Earth's orbit is sped up a couple of seconds. They can't account for it in physics. Well, it's because we're in a higher energy field. You know, and the photon belt is, and it's half the guys say, oh, that's just quackery. The other half say, no, there's something out there. We can measure a higher, background radiation, photon radiation field and so on. Well, it's like Earth goes around Alcyon in the Pleiades on a 25,000 year cycle. And as it does so, if you can imagine like a gyroscope with the echelon in the middle.
Yeah.
And a gyroscope has like a horizontal rig and it has a perpendicular to that ring. And of course, it's how those rings work that cause the gyroscope to do its stuff. Well, if you can imagine Earth going around Alcyon in the horizontal ring, and the photon belt is the one that's at right angles around it, it's 2,000 in our term of language. And don't forget, there's no such thing as space and time in the fifth dimension. This is strictly in Earth. So I'm using Earth ideas and concepts to model this, but it's a 2,000 year wide photon belt, right? So Earth, we've just come into it. We came into it in November of 2012. And you've got ring. A lot of people have this. The scientists or doctors call it tinnitus. It's not ringing in your ears. If you pay attention to it, the ringing is in the middle of your head, like throat. And there's probably 5 or 6 different frequencies. It's not just like one bzz, and it's musical. They're always flowing back and forth. The harmony of the sphere, it's a beautiful sound if you're not trying to fight it off. Anyway, that's because when we ended the photon belt, the neuron atoms and so on in your brain's chemistry sped up. Now you're listening to your atoms running around faster. That's what that buzzing, musical sound in your and it's constant. It's going to be there for 2,000 years. So you might as well get used to it.
I've noticed like harmonious variations in those frequencies. Like I get it all the time, and you can feel like sometimes it's almost deafening. And
it'll wane and it'll get louder, waner, depending on the astrophysics. The moment also you have a birth induction time and discharge time, which is 12 hours later, based on the exact moment of your birth. Remember, I said that when you come out of the womb, your soul atom triggers your outer consciousness into awareness, into consciousness. Yeah. Well, that cements it to the exact time, the frequency of that exact moment. The cosmic time, frequency of that exact moment. So at that same time, for the rest of your life, you have an induction. You'll feel your for about 5 minutes. You'll feel it'll go up, then come back down. And then 12 hours later, there'll be the discharge time, and you'll feel it go down. That adds into the photon belt noise, sounds that you're already hearing. It's really the same noise, but it's not noise. It's a beautiful sound, I don't know if you've listened to Solfago.
Oh yeah. I listen to the pure tones and Solfago.
It's similar to that, only whisper loud. Only it's in your head, not coming into your head. It's in your head. Yeah. So all right. So next, trains for the photon belt. New Day cycle 25,000. I've done that. It is because the magnetic fold. It is because new cosmic cycle. Yeah, I've done those. There's another aspect. The galaxy, all galaxies, because they're harnessed together magnetically and through gravity and through the consciousness of the triune beings of the stars and the planets and so on. So the galaxy rotates like, and scientists kind of misfire, it rotates like a phonograph record.
Yeah.
So from the central core on cue, there's a pulse released, and it goes out to the edge, and every planet that's in there experiences that pulse at the proper time within their life cycle because of the location and things like that. Well, I'm not 100% sure whether it's already passed. I think it has. I think it passed in 2014, somewhere around there, because they're talking about this pulse still coming, but I'm pretty sure it's already passed through because there's a huge bump, when the pulse moved through. But that imparts a huge cosmic. See, these inductions. See, first of all, we're in a field where the planet and solar system as a whole are experiencing a boost because of its evolution to come and so on. So we're experiencing that as not as a free ride. We're benefiting from that. But there's also actions going on that are directly for mankind's consciousness at this present time, which is like the this pulse from the galaxy. That is to bump mankind's consciousness up a notch, or to, and also because during the age of Aquarius, the rule of Aquarius, that's why it's the water pitcher, is the lady pouring out the waters of truth. Well, it's called the Great Book is being opened, or it's opened during Aquarius every 25,000 years when we go through the photon belt, for the 2,000 years. And mankind, the evolution in the fifth dimension, usually comes down to learn, the total cosmic law, like what's going on out there, how are things working properly and so on. I mean, the Revelatorium is like a Cliff's Notes to the great book that's coming in now. And these lectures that we're doing, these talks we're having are like a Cliff's Notes to the Cliff's Notes, because I'm just doing this as a thumbnail synopsis where there might be a whole chapter on some of the stuff I've just mentioned in the Revelatorium and so on, which itself might be just the thumbnail of the whole chapter that will eventually come down. So the inductions themselves don't teach or bring in illuminations or understandings. They raise the consciousness higher and higher so they can absorb or handle greater frequency thoughts. And so for the next 2,000 years, mankind's consciousness is going higher and higher and higher. And the inductions come in through usually into the triune celestial. Well, your Christ center in your brain, all right, in your pituitary gland. And then it feeds it out to the degree that your outer consciousness will accept it. It feeds it out to the outer consciousness as insights and illuminations and inspirations and epiphanies and stuff like that. They're constantly ongoing. This is the part, remember I talked to you earlier before we got going here, I was going to get into a bit of a Melchizedek teaching mode. Yes, well, this is it. We're going in the Melchizedek teaching mode. So
excellent.
The way this information comes into people's consciousness is not like, it's not like, it's not like air you breathe, so on. I can give about 5 or 6 examples of how the information for the Revelatorium has come around, and they won't be the only way, but it'll be some of them. It'll be like the example I showed you of the people meeting up on the hill in Preston.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of idea. So, but I've often, and most of this will come through at night when you're sleeping. They're called lucid dreaming. The prophets, you know, I had a vision. Well, they didn't suddenly in front of their eyes this big huge flash. They were sleeping away, and wow, you know, what a dream. You know, it's lucid dreaming. That's where most of this stuff takes place at night. And I know quite a few people that have had similar experiences to, and you included, to what I'm going to be telling you, you know, as an examples and so on. But I've had, you know, a good, not all of it, mind you, because, you know, some of it has come just by the thought just dropping in, you know.
Yeah.
There's interdimensionally from your Christ atom to your outer consciousness, there's 3 ways that communication can occur. One is called a landodontic, which is faith-based, and you're shown like a parable. Jesus taught by parables. You had to figure out what the parable was actually teaching you, you know. Well, you'll have a lucid dream with a pretty profound experience and so on, but there's a greater message in behind that you kind of have to sort of figure out.
Yeah.
Okay? The second is that the galactic center, like where this pulse comes out and so on. Every galaxy has a tribe, you know, three-way tribunal of rondodontic suns, and they're the government, you know, they're like the president of the galaxy. You know, the 3 together is representing the, you know, the Holy Trinity kind of idea, and they work on a direct see and feel and hear basis. So you can see pictures or that. I knew somebody that was reading pages, literally when they're and they saw the hand reach over and turn the page. You know, this is the Veronica way of communications coming down. I've had some of those. And
I have too, actually.
yeah, well, there you go. See, and then now for people that haven't picked up on this yet, keep your eye open, your third eye open. Keep your third eye open or your eye open, because you'll start. You know, if you're far enough along to be able to get into this kind of stuff that we're doing right here, so you're not far away. If it hasn't started, it's already been going on. You just didn't notice. That's what it comes down to. It's already been going on. You just didn't pick up on it yet. We'll start picking up on it because it's really fun once you do. You know, and then the final one is the Melchizedek communication, which is just pure thought. Just drops in. You know, just you get the thought. Christ was working with a pure. I mean, he didn't have to read. He didn't have to go to the library to look up stuff that he needed to know for 2,000 years. It was just given to him right there when he needed it. Always. The teaching 2,000 years ago, or in the 70s, you know, in the early 70s, the Melchizedek teacher, that was how he was working too. The stuff just dropped right in. Now I'm part way that way. I have what's called a Melchizedek power unit in my consciousness. Not everybody has them, but you know, quite a few people do, and it allows me to be able to function that way at the level of a Melchizedek without being a Melchizedek, which means that I will get, and so will you and some others, just a thought. There it is. I didn't know it before. I know all about it now because it was one thought. And as far as the Revelatorium, then the job was, that's why I call myself a wordsmith. Because, oh, geez, you know, I have to type away and I read it. Well, that gets, I do it fast to get the thought down before I lose it, you know, because you can lose this stuff. It's very vaporous. Some of this stuff can, when you wake up after a really lucid dream, you'll remember parts of it, but you won't remember the details.
Yeah, you got to.
You know, you got to get them down fast before they're gone, you know. And a while later, you'll remember the gist, but you won't remember the detail. Well, anyway, type away. Now you read. Well, now you redo it, and then you redo it, and then after a few times, there it is. That was what I saw and what I felt and what I, you know, the thought was dropped in. But the fun stuff is, I don't know if any of you remember Star Trek. Data, for example, they grab a Klingon vessel and they download the computer from, you know, and you see all these, you know, images and everything dropping down like, you know, like an avalanche or waterfall. And well, you can see that some nights. Some nights you might see something like that going on. Now, you have no idea what it was, but you know that down the road, not long, some new idea about something will come in. Well, 2 or 3 days later, you'll start to start to think about something. Just all of a sudden, you'll start thinking, like, which gravity was a little bit more complex. But anyway, what is gravity? And all of a sudden, you'll walk yourself through the whole explanation, just starting from scratch and right to the very, very end of it. Oh, boy, I better write that down real fast. But it's because it was given to you 2 days ago, and it took a while to process it. But all of a sudden, out it'll come. Another one that it happens for now. There's been a fair number of those. Another one that happens quite frequently is if you can imagine, like 60. You see in movies, these sci-fi movies where they've got the whole panorama of TV, computer monitors. They're watching, and like call it 60 of them and so on, and each one's got a different picture. Well, if you can imagine that, but the picture up here fades out, comes back in with a new picture. The one next to it fades out, all at different times, not all at the same time. They're all slowly fading out, slowly fading into new pictures. And this thing's going on. It's a really complex. Well, you can sort of, when you're lucid dreaming, you look at that for example. Well, you know that something's coming up the pipe down the road. Sure enough, all of a sudden you start thinking about that, and you walk yourself from one end to the other all the way through it. But that was a down. We're called down. You'll hear the expression downloads. People are talking about downloads all the time. That's a download. That's a down. That's your your soul atom and your pituitary is downloading it into your outer consciousness. Now it's trying anyway, and your outer consciousness for the most time, with people that haven't started to aren't receiving it because they don't see any relevance to it. That's what I'm saying. Start looking for relevance. Start looking for relevance. So there's another one and there's been quite a few of those. Now I had one of those happen. It was a slightly different, instead of like, computer monitor picture. It was like the squares were filled with different symbols. Yeah. Right, and the symbols were changing. But there was a language, I can't remember what it was called. It was way back in these early Sumerian or even before. But the Nazi symbols were part of that original language. Nazi symbols didn't just pop up, in 1930. They came out of a much more very, very strong black and white dominant, images, characters. It's like the Chinese do, only these are the Nazi form. Well, that was going on. Boom, boom. These images were changing, new symbols, and the Luciferian rebellion, the whole chapter in the Revelatorium came about by quite a number of those over time, because that was part of the negative aspect of the Luciferian stuff and so on. So that's another one. You'll see images and so on. You'll hear, I'm just trying to think of other examples. Well, I'll probably remember it by the time next week comes around. Right now, it's kind of. But anyway, those are the ideas. This is not cut and dried stuff, And as I say, the other, all of a sudden, out of the clear blue pop, you'll get an idea. You hadn't been even thinking about it, all of a sudden, something you didn't know before. Well, and that's the Melchizedek, the final way. You get the other ones that I've been telling you about were based on the Vronadam, side. But it's kind of fun. Because you know that when one of those things happen, that there's going to be something new come along, and you don't even necessarily know what it's going to be, but and all of a sudden you start thinking, just you daydream to yourself all day long. Everybody does that. You daydream, so you're just thinking about something. You're having a coffee or eating dinner, or you're even driving your car, and you start to muse. You go through the whole thing from front to back. Just walk yourself through it.
I got one for you. Just like the experience like you had with the images and stuff like that, but just a couple nights ago, actually, just a few nights, I swear that I visited the Dalmatia Center, and it looked like this. If I can get it. Show it. You can't see my screen.
Oh yeah.
And that's what the building looks like.
Huh.
And in the Revelatorium, it explained the Dalmatia Center as like the Aztec pyramids, how it has a flat top, and there's two side by side and things like that. And I was hovering over it, and I spent some time in the city there, and I was hovering over it. And I'm like, That looks familiar. But
Well, just suddenly might start getting some knowledge information about it. You might. I'm not saying you will, but you might. You could easily.
the one thing I've noticed though is like because understanding the difference between Veronadect and the mouse deck is
Stuff.
ways of induction is very crucial, so you can identify which one is which. But what I find all the time is that most of it is always usually Meldic, instant bang, bang,
Yeah.
bang, bang. Instant results, instant. Oh, I need to know this. Bling, there it is.
Yeah. Well, that's the Melchizedek power unit.
Yeah.
Action taking place. I want to mention something that just occurred to me now. When I'm talking about like these inductions, and the scientists say there was a huge, cosmic gamma ray burst that they recorded. Well, some of them you will see when you're asleep. You'll suddenly see a really brilliant white light that'll suddenly flare up, and then, well, that's if I see one of those things, well, anywhere in the next 3 or 4 months or so, they're going to report a big gamma ray burst or a big, high energy, something rather burst, which is stuff that has been set up billions of years ago to hit right now. I mean, it's targeted. This stuff is not flying around and we just happen to be flying through it, sailing through it. It's targeted. These things are targeted. But I had one, it was in March of 2013, April of 2013. It was so powerful, the light built up that it became, this is when I'm asleep. You have to understand, fully conscious when I'm asleep. This is what lucid dreaming is. It became so intense that I literally saw a thumb come over and cover it. So I wouldn't, burn my third eye retina or whatever, I literally saw a thumb come over and cover it because it was really bright. Well, that was an enormous, gamma ray about 8 or 9 months later. The greatest gamma ray that scientists have ever seen, So anyway.
And I heard there is also a scientist discovered a quasar that's pointed directly at Earth. The energy outflows.
Yeah, of course. Sure. Well, yeah, like I say, Earth is going to become a quasar
eventually.
Yep.
So
some of the stuff for the new creation has been set in motion, like I would say 1 trillion years ago. Some of this stuff, but hundreds of billions of years ago, anyway, for sure. Some of the stuff, like this particular galaxy, wasn't just molecules bumping around, and now you got to. I mean, it was planned. This whole local universe, the greater sun daughters, that are, local universes are the work of creator sun daughters, paradisical creator sun daughters, and they create a blueprint for what their local universe is going to be like and what it's going to do according to what they've been asked to get ready by the creator. We need this over there. Okay, I'll take care of it, and they show it to Grace. Yeah, okay, yeah, but you need to put a little bit more over here and pull out a little bit over there. All right, it's done. Good, go for it. And then they put it together. It's approved first, and then they bring it together. And that's a long time in planning. It's not like it's not like done tomorrow. And like this local universe has been underway for I don't know how many billions upon billions of years. And it's only about 2/3 of the way through. It's not finished yet.
Doesn't it only have? I think I remember the Revelatorium saying it has every 640 something galaxies with a cubistic capacity of 1,036 or something.
Yeah. So.
And that's and here's I got a question too that I wrote down. So it's about Caligastia. And about his stance of neutrality and how, like the Revelator explains, that was because he was being affected by the feedback static, because how it.
To your point, when you're this everything's done through the staffs. If you go into the Revelatorium and out the qubit, it's called a qubit and so on. But there are energy lines called staffs. And that's the energy comes down out of the 16th dimension through the Holy Trinity to get unitized on it. And then it pipes down, and that's how it's the staffs that build, the energies, the outer energies, the only begotten son, daughter. Those are the energies that build the planet and stars and our incarnation, stuff like that. But when they're static, our consciousness is generating negative static. So that channel comes down through Christ Michael into the Landodonic, first level Landodonics that are the heads of the local solar sectors. All right. And from them down into the planetary princes, who are the secondary Landodonics and so on. And from the Landodonic, the planetary princes into the evolution that's on the planet, and the planet too, So it's through these staff channels. But if there's discord going on, like here, because mankind in the third dimension is a very discordant situation,
It definitely is.
But statically, it goes back up the channels. Well, up through Caligastia, and from Caligastia and all of the others that are involved up into Lucifer, and that took them out. There's an expression, I can't remember the name of the lady. She wrote a book called Dialogues with the Devil, and she must have been piped because it was very accurate. But she said, alas, poor Lucifer, once you were a being of radiant light, now you're just pure electricity. No, now you're just static electricity. Well, that's static coming back up,
Yeah.
And he's been in solitary confinement for over 3 million years on a planet called Zab. But he's starting to come to his feet. So the process of redemption is already starting to take place. Now, that's a long time.
It's almost like there's a TV show on, I don't watch TV, but called Lucifer, and eventually the moral of the story is him starting to do good, like he tortures, so that could probably be one of his soul atoms kind of putting out the forth that, yes, he is coming along.
Well, actually, matter of fact, it's funny you say that because, and this is, again, I have a phone ringing. I'm going to let it ring. I will get a message, please phone, yada, yada, which I will do, but I'm not going to break this conversation. So there we go. I was going to leave my phone off the hook, but I forgot. So remember I told you before, and can we do this a half an hour later because I was expecting a phone call? Yeah, well, I'm willing to bet.
That was the phone call.
It's just a little bit later than I thought it would come. Anyway, so, you have your whole soul atom, but your whole soul atom, which is somewhere up there, has 99 male ovarian, they're called ovarian atoms. They're male and female too, but they're based on the male side of consciousness. And you have 99 female, ovarian atoms, male and female, but they're the other way. They're based on the female side of consciousness. And you have one that's both, male and female together. All right. Jesus and then 199th can represent by proxy the whole soul atom in a situation that's needed. 2,000 years ago, Jesus and Mary Magdalene were the 199th soul atom of Christ Michael of Nebadon, the creator son daughter of this local universe, doing a bestow, and they were the 199th having the power by proxy of the whole, who have seen me as things right. I mean, as I said last week, with a wink of an eye, they could have dissolved the whole planet and all the shit that was coming at them,
Yeah.
But that's not the way higher cause works. That's the way the negative people work. That's the way the Democrats are going to try and win the control of the country again. By
all the clones, the Democrat clones.
I'm not a big fan of the idea of laboratories springing people up out of nutrient beds that are fully conscious clones because of the DNA or anything, but I am 100% in tune with the idea that you pick somebody that looks a lot like, because the doppelgangers, the German had it right. There are people around somewhere that look exactly like you somewhere, and you pick somebody that looks really close, you make a few modifications. I mean, just look at how many different people have stood up and said, I'm Hillary Clinton. Let me, there's probably been 6, There's a couple right now with Biden. One of them's not too smart, so has a poor memory. Can't remember, has to read the teleprompter. and doesn't even know how to use it properly.
And there's been 4 different types of Bill and Melinda Gates, like.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. So I mean, they're used, properly in where their appearance could be at risk, so they'll put a clone out there instead. But they're also when the particular party has been compromised or taken out of the picture or something like that, they keep it going by, and I'm not even going to get into that because there's a lot of that going on,
Oh, apparently
there's
yes.
a lot of that going on. You just have to read anything other than the mainstream media to find out about that, because the mainstream media won't touch that stuff with a 10-foot pole, because it's against their interests to let the cat out of the bag, so they're not going to tell you.
Oh, I got another question here.
Yeah.
It's kind of on the topic of the Verona deck and mouse deck coming in and stuff like that. But like when I can't remember exactly where the Revelatorium, but he was talking about how sometimes other soul atoms and the Verona decks and that they'll pass problems to you to translate and things like that. Like one soul atom passing to another a problem or something for it to be translated because you'd be better qualified or have experiences that help in that translation. And the one example of that was back 4 years ago, because the Vril are a subclass of the Draconis. They're pretty much the slaves of the Draconis. And so back when I was at my other place and not here, so about 4 or 5 years ago, the question came in because the Vril, like the Eye of Horus and all that, is indicative of them taking over an active projection, an active third outer projection. So, and the problem was the way to stop that kind of war and stop them from taking active projections. So when it was passed to my soul atom, we conferred, and the result was for them to take clones. So they don't have, so they have a fair chance because it's their masters that make their lives hell, and so they can expand their cubistic matrix or have a fair chance to expand a cubistic matrix, so they can possibly go up to the 5th.
There's some people in this area, particularly in this area here. She's been subject to that kind of stuff for some time now. She's finally starting to break free of it, but people, borrowing from her consciousness, literally, and putting stuff into her consciousness and so on. That stuff kind of goes on, but it's sort of like a sub-level, and it's not widespread. I mean, she'll screech and say it's all over the place, but I don't. It's not. There's not that many people that can do that, and that stuff is being, Christ Michael 2,000 years ago on the Mount put in protective factors. Like the demons can no longer show up wherever they want. Like before that, you drove, you sailed your boat around the viscous sea and things like that, and the Cyclops came running at you, and the Sirens came running at you, and all these demonic presences putting on a show to scare the hell out of you, literally. Not scare the hell into you, is a better way to put it. But anyway, but he put a stop to that 2,000 years ago, too. He put in protective factors so that the demonic ones are curtailed, and also the people that would misuse consciousness and so on, it's a lot harder for them to do it, because there are people that have complete facility of the 4th dimension, and they have been misusing that. So I did start a point, and I forgot to finish it because we started talking about something else. The ovarian atom.
Yes.
Well, Lucy, because you had suggested the idea, and it's 100% true. There is, that was my cell phone. The party's trying to get me on my cell. They'll wait. They'll have to wait. Anyway, there's an ovarian atom from Lucifer that's in the works, and James, the brother of Jesus, is an example, and that's an ovarian atom that's being straightened up, as it were, to be able to backbone Lucifer himself when he's ready to start. And there's also the female half. See, the female half of Lucifer never rebelled. It was just the male half of the Luciferian male-female androgyne.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah, just mute your mic and I'll keep going. I'll just talk a little bit.
All right. I don't know how to do that, so I'll just. Hello. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm in the middle of my interview. I'll have to call you back. Shit, yeah. Okay, yeah. See you. Bye. There you go. We're done.
Very good.
Yeah. So no, I know. I mean, she instantly understood what I said because she's been following this. So,
Oh,
but
nice.
anyway, and he was incarnated in this current cycle. He passed in his 80s in the middle part of the 90s, and he was a gadfly in the Christ work that was being put together in the early 70s. I mean, he wasn't evil, but he was always meddling. That's the best way to put it. You know, he was always meddling, so he has some work to do too. But he did. There was a couple of times when he did the right thing when it had to be done at the right time. You know, to his credit. So
Yeah, I get that every once in a while.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
But the one thing I've noticed though is like because that one post I did about the cosmic confirmation of us doing this, the one thing was is I haven't had any huge flooding dreams, and I figure
flooding. Oh golly, I've had some monumental flooding
I
dreams, and
know
then
like
the big.
huge like
Yeah, and I mean, I've run to the top of some of them. I've run to the top of the highest hill that there was, and watched the water come right up. Literally, you know, the whole ocean come up just about to my feet, and stop. And so I've seen. I've been in a house where the rain hit and the roof come down, and then you know I've been. You look outside and there's a river going by, and then there's a huge river going by, and then there's a gigantic river going by, and they're always followed in not too long, like days afterwards, it's owned by a hurricane in Ceylon, you know, or you know, a dam breaks. I mean, you see that when you have these big flood dreams and so on, something's coming up.
yeah.
You're being shown. You're being shown,
I
and
also
that's fairly common too. That's not an unusual type of dream.
I
You
also
know,
heard like the Revelator speaks on it briefly about how it's one way of them showing like if you're not on the path with creation and your responsibilities, it's one way of the it showing you um, you know how big it is and the one quote was you're supposed to let the tidal wave go over you and come up stronger than
that's
before.
somebody else's quote. That's not in the Revelatory.
Yeah, I know
That's
that's
somebody
not in the
else's quote.
Revelatorium, but
Yeah.
the quote wasn't. But the discussion on the wave and how it's um, showing you and how far away of you are on your doing your responsibilities will be depending on how big the wave is and if it's a small
And don't
stream
forget
or
too, a lot of these type of things are, it's the state of consciousness at the time that's allowing that to happen, or because of the state of consciousness that the turbulence occurs on. Because if the consciousness changes, that doesn't have to happen.
yeah.
There's a couple of cases I used to see. The Vancouver, BC's fourth, you know, in the fourth dimension over a lot of the big cities. There's a fourth dimensional version of those cities, and some of them are just jaw dropping, beautiful. But Vancouver, I watched like big sections of the downtown negative areas.
Oh, did you get disconnected? Bellstar, are you there? Sorry for the interruption, everybody. I believe Delstar's connection got interrupted. We'll wait 2 minutes here to see if he comes back, and I'll give him a call actually here to see if.
Well, the Luciferian ovarian atom, and he was you
Yes.
know, he was a consider. Now he had complete facility in the fourth dimension. He could do anything he wanted through the fourth dimension. Um, uh, it's the same as you know, Satan wasn't. How do I put it? Satan didn't rebel. Was never a rebeller. Satan had been duped into the idea of bringing life down into the third dimension was good for the planet.
Yeah.
That's what she took to the planets. When she passed in the early 90s, she returned to the feet of Christ and brought all her people with her and has received complete abolition because she was not evil. All of that stuff that is assigned to, she was a bonded woman in the fear and loathing of mankind because all that crap that others put together
Yeah.
and threw on the top of her, she had nothing to do with it, you know. So
It's just like all them saying she was a man. and it was the.
Oh yeah, well yeah. No, she was the female half of a third level Lonodonic. Like the first level Lonodonics are the solar sector administrators. The second level Lonodonics are the planetary princes. No, they don't have the power to create planets and stars or something like the first level Lonodonics, but they do have the power. It's their job to completely manage the consciousness of the population on, that are in the planet. That's their job, is to manage that. And then the third level Lonodonics are the ambassadors, literally the ambassadors. Well, Satan, or Satanic, I think is the Italian term for it. She was the female half of a third level Lonodonic ambassadorial from Draconis. She was Draconian. Because the Draconians, remember I said the Draconians were in a stage of regression?
Yeah.
Well, because they were in a state of regression, when the Luciferian stuff came on, I said, hey, this is great. So and that's why the dragon shall be cast on, it wasn't just the Draconians, but most of them were that are here are Draconians, and of course, it's just like, it's like there's a prison, there's prisons here, but the general population are not bad. It's just in the prison. Well, it's just a handful of Draconians that are bad, even though there's a lot of handfuls, but that idea, and like, for example, her other half, the male half, when she was incarnating, and so on, Solomon was her soulmate half at that time, and he had 100%, he was given total control of the fourth dimension, and his problem was carnal. He couldn't keep his pants zipped, so to speak. And in this incarnation, her soulmate half was a British. She was born in England, came over, just after the First World War. But Lord Exeter, his name was Lord Exeter, came over, and he founded Loveland in Colorado, which is a free love society. Emissaries of the Divine Light, as it was called.
Yeah.
Sun runs it now, and so on. And there was also a magnetic vortex up in the interior of British Columbia at 100 Mile House. So now there's the Exeter Lodge, which is the big motel and restaurant. And across the highway is the log cabin where the Exeter restaurant and everything. They took over the vortex and so on.
Yeah.
But he incarnated, and the carnal aspects, it's continued. Because Loveland is a free love society. That's how they're getting new recruits and so on. The girls would go out and get the men,
Lure them back in.
Yeah, lure them back in, yeah. They're lured into your sex. And that's an easy lure for most men,
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I've really been working on my carnality, and I've noticed the difference in concentrating on the fountain of youth and the Holy Grail principles, and proper internalization.
Yeah. Well, I guess I think I pretty well. Let me just take a quick glimpse. Clarity is also because of the induction and agreement. Well, it looks like I pretty well. I may have missed one or two, but
we'll get. They'll
pop out in the conversation somewhere along the way without having any business being where they pop out.
Oh, and the other thing was about that Vril thing, and how about them stop taking active projections. So I actually did get confirmation about that's what's actually happening, is they're taking the clones of dead people and coming out into the population to try and live, a loving human life. So it's just like, interesting. And that comes up a lot. I seem like a lot of problems get kind of sent my way.
Yeah.
For translation, and it's like,
Well, let's see if you're one of the. A lot of people have read the Revelatorium, and most of them, they're called spiritual bumps. They read the stuff and it's knowledge, and they don't do anything with it. But here and there, somebody does do stuff with it. You're one of them, so
yeah,
you'll get stuff to handle.
Well, if it's the water of truth, man, I'm that big sponge.
Yeah. Well, all right. I'm
Cool.
gonna say that's good. Yep.
Yeah, we'll end her on that note.
Yep. Now, next week, I think I'm going to do the seven super universe. No, the seven dimensions of the seven super universe. That's it. So I'll cover some of the stuff we talked about today, but it'll be a more deep context. You know,
the seven dimensions of outer creation, or the seven dimensions.
no, it's the seven dimensions of the seven super universes.
Okay, seven dimensions. The
seven super universes, but each super universe has seven dimensions.
Yeah.
The outer creation has seven dimensions. So that's like a blanket in the seven super universes. Share those. I mean, every super universe has the seven dimensions, but the same seven dimensions just tailored to,
Yeah, exactly. Just tailored to the individual.
Super universe. Yeah.
Cool. Alrighty, so we'll close it on that note. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Del Star. We definitely appreciate this discussion lecture tonight.
Well, Golly, let me say thank you for inspiring this whole thing, because you're quite a vortex center, because these interviews are getting out there, because I'm hearing from people that
I can feel it going into the human consciousness. Like I've noticed actually in some people, they've said different things, and it's like, how come you're talking more like, fifth dimensional terminology?
Yeah.
And I know that they did not before, and they didn't have any looking into it, but then suddenly they, know somewhat of, so at least the stillment's there.
Well, it's like said, upon this rock, I found my kingdom. I will found my kingdom. Establish my kingdom. That's it. Well, upon this rock, Peter the Rock. How's that?
Again.
Yeah, how's that? No, Peter is in Canada. Actually, I'll finish off with this. It's sort of an interesting thing. See,
the Crucible.
They were in the Garden of Gethsemane. There was a protective field that had been set up. And the original idea of Jesus was very homely. Jesus did not look like a saintly being with white flowing robe. He was actually, very striking looking person, very swarthy, very, I don't know how to put it. He was a very solid looking person, but he had a very noticeably ski nose, and his jaw and lips and everything forward, a bit like Steven Tyler from. Or whatever, that idea, only a lot more exaggerated, And so he was basically quite homely from respect to what pretty men are supposed to look like, kind of thing. So the guards wouldn't walk into the group and say, "Oh, well, you come on with us," because they wouldn't tell which one it was. So the idea was that Jesus would step forward to the guards. The energies coming through would move through to the guards and then continue moving, and it would translate the conditions in through the courts and everything. That would clear the way, and Jesus would be fine. But Peter was told, they were all told in advance, keep your cool. But Peter, by nature, was confrontational. And he still is in this incarnation, confrontational. Some people never learn. So anyway, he got all riled up, and he cut off the guard's ear. And of course, they grabbed him in anger. They grabbed Jesus in anger, and the energies were going in the wrong direction. Pontius Pilate could have reversed that by freeing him, saying, "I see no guilt in this man, but do with him what you want." Well, bad move, Now he exonerated himself. This time, you always, whatever you do, you in a later incarnation, especially at these peak points like now, you're put into a situation where the circumstances are similar in principle, so you can undo what you did the last time. See, well, Pierre Elliott Trudeau is now the head of the Liberal Party in Canada in the 60s. And there was a big issue about whether Canada didn't have capital punishment at the time. And there was a big issue whether the Liberal Party should endorse capital punishment or not. So he was asked, as head, before he was Prime Minister, he was asked, what would you do if your party votes capital punishment? He said, "Well, I guess I don't need to be the head of a party like that." He exonerated himself. But that's why Pierre, the Americans might not know, but he had a very steely looking manner about himself, look and manner, very steely. And the Pontius Pilate.
Yes, he definitely was. That's why Petro-Canada is named after that steely manner. Pierre-Elliott Trudeau ripped off Canada.
Anyway, that's
Uh,
so.
excellent. No, thanks, Del Star, for coming in and tuning us up, for flushing it all out for us. We
Yep.
definitely appreciate that.
Well, I could say Cliff Notes to the Cliff Notes. I like that. I just came up with that just a couple of months ago. I never thought of that in all these years of Revelatorium about Cliff's Notes.
It
I used
is.
to study Cliff's Notes when I was at university.
Yeah.
You had to have Cliff Notes to figure out what was going on. So,
Alrighty, thank you everybody for staying tuned. We look forward to seeing you next week, and that'll be an interesting talk and discussion again about the 7 super universes and the 7 dimensions of the 7 super universes.
great. Yep.
And that'll be a riveting discussion too. So everybody, please, if you want a copy of the Revelatorium, you can find it at Amazon.com. Just search Revelatorium. It'll be the only one that pops up. You can check out the.
And it's also on the internet.
Yes. Just
www.revelatorium.com.
You'll see all the links to the websites in the read me below in this video.
Oh yeah, in your printout. Yeah.
Yes. All 3 links to all the books. Radionics will be ready sometime soon. In the future.
It's ready now, but it's in a rough shape. That's what I'm working on right now as we speak. I'm breaking off at 9:30 to do this, and once we're done, I still have an hour I can work, because I usually hit the sack this is our time. I'm looking at 12:30, so I'll hit the sack about 2 o'clock. But
Indeed.
I'll spend an hour. When I get up in the morning, I already know what I'm going to be doing all day tomorrow. Finishing up the radionic ship book. So.
Excellent, and we're definitely looking forward to that. Radionic Ships is absolute masterpiece. It's brilliant, and it'll definitely enlighten everybody on how to look and see them all and confirm that they are there, because they are.
That's the point.
Just the other day there, because of the one device in the garage, you should have seen it. It was like a parade of there's probably about 100 or 200 sylphs marching, plus about 30 or 40 light ships and a big mothership sitting there, and it was crystal clear sky, and they were just right over top, and they were.
And you didn't take a photograph and send it to me?
I know, I was going to.
Peter, no, anybody, by the way, that you want, if you get into radionic ship and stuff, I've got probably 9,000 photographs altogether now. Some of them are really good, some of them are not really good. And the ones that I have picked that are in the book now, I'm prepared to swap out on a minute's notice when a better one comes in. So,
damn. Okay.
really,
Next time, I tell you, that was.
And who knows when that's
beautiful.
Here's an example. I went out 3 days ago here in Brantford, Ontario, where I am, and I was only going to do a quick little short thing, so I didn't take my cell phone, my camera. Well, the radionic ships are in the ionized higher cloud atmosphere, but really, if they're in close and so on, and there's a really heavy overcast, low cloud overcast, the magnetic lines will form inside here's this from wall to wall, absolutely perfect mothership, right at about 1,000 feet up in the low cloud overcast, and I didn't have my camera.
I know. Just like we a couple days ago. But I noticed, because of this device, and when they like to sit in between, because it does like a 4th dimensional kind of sheathing, in between the layers, depending on the configuration I have it at, and they like to sit in that. And I noticed, on certain settings, the sylphs will come out like
probably checking out what the heck is this.
You should. Well, they're probably helping regulate it, because it is tied into Zestra. So and man, it was like marching. They were in formation, the sylphs and the radionic light, and you could see the radionic ship sitting there, a big mother ship.
I'd love to see. I've got photographs of sylphs and radionic fields, but that would have been a really good photograph.
And there was no other clouds. It was, you could clearly see, the individuals going in formation, and then over there you could see the small scouts, and then the father and a big mother. It was a big mother.
Actually, as a matter of fact, I might as well interject now. As soon as the radionic ships is done, I already have about 250 sylph photographs.
Nice.
There is a chapter in the radionic ships, but it has maybe 40 photographs, but I have already now over 250. So I have another book, It won't be a big one, not like the radionic ships, but it'll be. See, there's nothing up there about SILFs. Like the internet has 2 or 3 sites, and they have all kinds of photographs, and maybe about 3 out of the whole website collection combined has actually a SILF. What they have is fragments of radionic clouds, which they're calling SILFs.
That's what I was noticing too on when I just did a general image search of the SILFs, and that's what I noticed. I'm like, hey, that's like radionic ships. That's not SILFs. They had the one big one there, and the coincidences, and we know that no coincidences are in creation. Then that same SILF appeared in my place too.
Yeah, there you go.
And it was exactly the same shape with the big long flowing tail and the exactly the same shape. And but a couple days ago there, next time I see that, man, I tell you, I'm gonna snap a pic because it's undeniable. There's no other clouds in the sky.
Well,
and it was
this is the way you do it. You have to be fairly steady, but you go snap, 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 because I can patch those together by a photo merge program and get the original panorama. So because if you just take that, you only get a tiny piece of it. But you start outside of this side of it, you don't, you get, because I can crop, but you snap, snap, snap side by side. I've got one in there in the book that's 13 pictures side by side, and the photo merge program puts together one nice, now that's a tech, see, that's funny. When I first started out doing, this phase of stuff in the spring of July of 2016, I was using Photoshop. Photoshop doesn't like merging photographs that aren't perfectly matched. And there's no way on the planet you're going to take your cell phone and get them to perfectly match. You have to make sure that you overlap though, because if there's a gap, it can't photo merge because it has to have info from this one to pull together, see?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, you're going to get this way, you're going to get that way. But now there's one called Photo Director that showed up, and it doesn't mind this and that, whammo. And they redid it about 6 months ago, twice as good. See?
Oh, nice.
So so I redid all my photographs, all of the ones that were photo merged. I had about 350 photo merged photographs. And I redid them all because it was so much better improved,
Well, I tell you, Del Star, this next time that happens, I'm definitely going to snap a picture because they really love to hover around this device. And I know they're helping, they're helping regulate the energies, right? Because if I put a circular magnet on the one part of it, that lightning storm that happened on the West Coast here, that was from that. Because I put a circular magnet on the one part of the resonator, and it was staggered from one to the other. So in between that was like negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive.
I'm looking forward to getting out there and having a look at all this stuff, because see, there was one of the fellows in the Christ teachings in the early 70s was doing that kind of stuff, and then I kind of expected that he would be doing all kinds of that kind of stuff since, but he hasn't. He's done Oregon towers and things like that, and Cloudbuster and things like that, but he hasn't done any
geometric like pyramids.
No, he hasn't done
like
anything in the Telsa area things, Tesla area things.
That device is man, I tell you, and it follows the Cuban sphere perfectly with the it's absolutely probably tens of thousands of frequencies.
Maybe that's why you're doing it, because he wasn't. Somebody had to do it,
Exactly.
That's why I said there's creators work with safe redundancy. If somebody isn't ready or can't do it, like I'm not the guy that was supposed to have done the Revelatorium. I'm the backup.
Yeah. The original guy walked away, didn't he?
No, that was earlier than that. Yeah, that was That was he was a walk-in Melchizedek, but instead of like the guy that gave the teachings who let Melchizedek run the show, gracefully, his outer ego wouldn't let go, and so he continued running his own show, taking advantage of what he was shown by the Melchizedek. So everything he's done since is under the fold. Under the fold means they don't know what the whole plan is. They do not know what the whole plan is. That's under the fold,
Okay, so let's end it on that note, Delstar, because I know you still have some work to do here before it gets too late in your time, since you're 3 hours ahead.
Time for coffee.
Indeed. So thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you all next week, and this Saturday will be the first airing of the reading, the Revelatorium reading. We'll start with the intelligent design, like you suggested, Delstar, and we'll do the preface and the universal disclosure. I noticed that the universal disclosure is in the book and not online.
Yeah.
So I'll go from the book from there, and then I'll
No,
transfer over
which not online?
the this part.
No, it is. It's called the design of creation.
Design of
Designofcreation.com.
Yeah, I know. I was on that, but it's it just jumps right to the summary of the intelligent design.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, in the book there was an intro chapter, but
Yeah.
that's been superseded by the whole book.
Essentially. So what I was gonna do is I was gonna read the universal, which is just the intelligent design, and then do the preface.
You might mention too. We talked about this too. You know, the audio version is a blind people.
Yeah.
So if anybody out there knows about, you know, and also you're driving in your car, you know, or you're you know, eating dinner, you know, I was going to say sitting on the can, but that's kind of gross.
But anyway,
like newspaper, you know.
Yeah. Alrighty, everybody. So stay tuned for that. That's every Saturday. These lecture discussions with Delstar is every Wednesday and are recorded on Wednesdays. They're usually posted on Thursdays by the time it's done processing. So thank you and stay tuned. Please like and subscribe. Hit the subscribe button and stay tuned. See you all next week. Thanks, Delstar, again. It was a beautiful discussion tonight. It was a lot of information. We even had a internet interruption. It must have been that damn good.
You might say blip.
Yeah.
When you edited or something.
We got blipped. This will be the first episode that actually gets some editing.
Yeah.
As little as possible.
Small moment. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like 3 days. You know, it was what, 10 minutes?
At least we didn't have to remember the same shirt.
We're wearing the same shirt. Yeah,
so
right,
definitely, Delstar, definitely appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Stay tuned to We Are in the Golden Age. I'm your host, Peter Ross of the Milk Family. Thanks. Have a great night.
Thank you.